everyone, this is Crystal, aka Sauce.
And this is Tanya, aka Season. Welcome to Sauce and Season, a podcast dedicated to real people to provide real talk and real healing on various topics. We are both wives, moms, entrepreneurs, and business professionals. Our hope is that through these topics and experiences we share, we can gain new insight for ourselves and provide new insights for others. We are excited that you decided to join us as we take this wild roller coaster ride that we call life together and hope that you stick around.
Hello everyone, this is Crystal, aka Sauce.
And this is Tanya, aka Season. Today's topic is just a little me time, all about self-care. Many think of self-care as a selfish moment, particularly when we are responsible for others. We make sure they are cared for, but often forget our own needs. In the process, we leave ourselves open to fatigue, bitterness, and a mirage of other emotions and feelings. So let's dive in and talk about it.
So today we're going to talk about different types of mental health or different types of health that we often need to have self-care for. So we're going to talk about self-care for mental health, self-care for physical health, self-care for emotional health, and then self-care for our spiritual health. So we're going to start off with that mental health. So of course, the mental health is all about what's going on in our head. It's that mental brain aspect of things. And so it's very important to make sure that we're taking care of our mental health because a lot of people don't realize that mental illnesses are very rampant nowadays. And so it's so important to make sure that you're conscious of your thoughts, being cautious of what's going on in your head, and just being mindful of what's around you. So with our mental health, the first thing we want to do is make sure that we rest. It's so important to get rest and to pay attention to what your body needs and when your body needs it. And then it's also important to make time for yourself. We want to make sure that we're allowing ourselves to have that personal time because deprivation is not healthy. We need to have time for ourselves and to ourselves.
And, I think that's important. Today I was listening to a video from a good friend, a woman of God. I was listening to her, and that was what she was dealing with. She was dealing with the mind. She was dealing with how we look at ourselves, how we determine ourselves, how we think. And I didn't even realize how much I had allowed my own self-esteem to waver in regards to recent situations in my own life. Mm-hmm. Sometimes troubles can hit you back to back, and it tends to shift your thoughts. We talked about mind shifting before in one of our topics, but sometimes even when you're talking about it, you don't realize it's hitting you too. Mm-hmm. So you'll talk about it, and then you'll leave that situation or leave that conversation and still go back to the same place. Mm-hmm. And then another situation will hit you, and it takes you further out. Correct. So mentally, you have to prepare yourself. Find a way to prepare yourself no matter what's going on with your mental thoughts.
I agree.
It is also important to maintain a healthy relationship with yourself. So that's a good part of mental health. When you're maintaining a healthy relationship with yourself, how do you look at yourself? How do you think about yourself? How do you look at your failures or your victories? Sometimes we can beat ourselves up more than anybody else can.
Correct.
And that beats up on your mental fortitude. When you're going through a situation and you haven't done the best thing. You haven't done the best job in your mind. And so you begin to downplay yourself. And that beats up on your self-esteem overall. So then you start to speak negatively about yourself. I remember sometimes, one time a person had said to me, "You're doing such a great job." But because I was in my head, I was like, just looking at them like, "Yeah, really?" Because here I am thinking that the job I'm doing is not well. And so I required that outward extrinsic motivation to tell me I was doing something good because I had beaten myself up so much I couldn't find my intrinsic level of motivation to tell myself that I'm doing a great job. So it's important to maintain a healthy relationship with yourself.
That's good, and you made a lot of good points. And so one of the main things, even with maintaining that healthy relationship with yourself, and you kind of gave your example, that's the issue, is that another thing we need to make sure that we're doing is being kind to ourselves and making sure that we're having that positive self-talk. That's something that we may need to practice, but practicing that positive self-talk, practicing being kind to ourselves, practicing giving ourselves that credit when that credit is due. That's a major thing that's important. And then another thing you kind of touched on a little bit earlier, you were saying that, we are so responsible for so many other things and so many other people that sometimes we put their needs and make sure that their needs are taken care of.
Right.
But then oftentimes we forget ourselves. And the reason why that's a problem is because if we are not taking care of ourselves, if we are not in a healthy framework for ourselves, how can we really truly be of service to anybody else? How can we really do anything for anybody else and take care of others? Because if we're damaged and we're broken, then ultimately we may think that we're doing a lot, but we really aren't. We're not giving our 100% when we are not at a 100% for ourselves. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have bad days. It doesn't mean that we stop taking care of people. No, you still should take care of others. If you have a family, like we are both wives, we have families. So it's important for us to make sure that we're taking care of our family. But at the same time, or I'm going to say, and at the same time, it's very important that we take care of ourselves because we are the women of the house. And if we are not in that positive headspace, if we are not mentally sane in the moment, we are not of good service to anybody. That includes our husband, and that includes our kids. And so I think a lot of people have to remember, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't make sure you have that you time, if you don't make sure that your mental health is under control, then you really are going to be a disservice to your kids and to your family, if you mean it or not. Sometimes it can be something very unintentional. Like if we are not in a mental headspace that's positive, then sometimes we may find ourselves walking around the house screaming or, getting easily agitated or for whatever reason we're battling negative thoughts. And, we talked a lot about negative thoughts last time with that mind shift segment. And so a lot of this kind of ties into that as well. Like if we are not mentally sane and not having everything under control in our own head, we really are not of service to anybody else. So that's another thing we have to be mindful of. And then we have to notice how our choices affect ourselves and what's not working in our life. We have to notice what is it that's going on in our lives that's not helping us or that's causing damage or that's not working, because all of that contributes to our mental health. If something is broken or something is not right, ultimately we are going to be in a negative space, whether we intend for it to happen or not. And so you have to notice what choices are happening in your life and what's affecting you. What's affecting your mood? What's affecting your mental health? What's affecting, what's going on in your household? And then what's working and what's not working. It's important to do both. I think oftentimes we look at what's not working a little bit more. Because that's the thing that we want to fix. But it's so important to see what is working. When I talk to my clients, I tell them, those who battle depression, you have to look at what makes you climb out of bed. So what is it? What are the good things that's happening? Because that's what you need to, notice, because that's what you're going to need to fuel yourself to every day strive to get up out of bed, to do better. And that's the same thing with our mental health. What is working in our life that's helping us practice that self-care? And then on the other hand, what is not working? Because we do need to know what's broken so that way we know how to fix it. But you need to know what's working very well and what's already fixed, so that way you can continue utilizing that while you work on the other components as well.
I think you said something great, because self-reflection is important. When you're thinking about self-care, reflecting on yourself, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it's important to look at those different aspects of life. Because if you don't, then in the middle of it, you're going to stop and you can have a breakdown mentally. And to recover from that, it may require a lot more work than to first deal with it from the beginning. I know one of the things is that when you become when you're thinking about self-care and when you leave yourself open to a rampant mirage of different emotions and things, one of the things is being bitter and fatigued. Because you become bitter when you feel as though things are not going your way. And that could be some of your self-care issues. I remember your dad is very good at telling me, honey, you need to sit down. Because I would come in straight from work, wouldn't change my clothes or anything. I'd wash my hands, go straight in the kitchen, start cleaning, and then I would start yelling and screaming, why aren't the dishes done? Why isn't the garbage taken out? And then everybody would stand still and look at me like, why are you always screaming? And it's like, because I feel like I'm the only one doing this. And your dad would say, well, if you ask for help, you would be better off, but you don't ask for it. And the reason you don't ask for it is because it's not done the way you want it done. So now here I am. I'm doing everything. So I'm saying nobody's looking at me. Nobody's helping me. The kids are not helping. But part of my self-care is to ask for help. To say, hey, look over here. I need a little help. And delegate. Oh, that's where leadership comes in. And I laugh because I always talk about the fact that being a stay-at-home mom for 8 years helped me with being a leader. But I'm not delegating now that I'm back at work, now that I'm doing these things after you all have grown up, I'm not delegating. I'm used to being a stay-at-home mom. So I'm used to doing the cooking, the cleaning, the washing. I'm not used to saying, hey, you need to clean the bathroom. You need to do this. You need to do that, And so I'm not delegating. So I'm not taking care of myself. And so now I'm bitter. I'm angry, which opens the doors to fatigue, which also opens the door to things like jealousy.
Correct.
Because I look at other people and I say, oh, their life is just, I don't even know what's going on in their home. But now I'm jealous because you look like you're not fatigued. You look like you're not bitter.
You look like you have everything
together.
like
you have everything together.
You really don't know if that's true.
I don't know if that's true. And so mentally now I have to pull myself back. And that's so good because I'm always going to come from scriptures. But I also think about the word of God. And like I said earlier, I was listening to a live from a good friend. And she was talking about that mental place. You understand? Where we have to be careful what we allow our thoughts to do in us. Because then it takes us to other places. Mm-hmm. And then will we ever reach the things that God wants us to reach, in our lives? Can we ever do what God wants us to do? And that's part of that self-care too, is asking God for help. Mm-hmm. When we're in that mental space. So I think that's excellent.
That's good. And I think, a lot of what you said is so important. And you touched on the next part that I was going to mention, which was reach out for help if needed. Right. I think oftentimes we don't ask for help because either we want to have that superwoman mentality or Superman mentality where we want to handle everything on our own or feel like we should handle things on our own. I remember saying that a little bit in one of our earlier podcasts. But it's so important to reach out for help if needed. That can be, help from, like you said, telling and delegating to your family and telling them what you need from them, or telling your spouse, I need your help, or, I'm struggling today, or today is a day where it's not my good day. Yeah. It's so important to lean on those people that we can lean on and ask for help with them. And then it sometimes may be taking it a step further and going back to what we talked about before, which is seeking mental help if you need it, or, help from a therapist, because there's nothing wrong with that either. Going to your spiritual leader, whichever you decide to do, is so important to reach out for help, whichever way it looks like for you and your family. And then ask yourself, what do you need to create a strong support system? I am so grateful for the support system that I have. I can honestly say if it was not for my support system, which includes so many people, so I'm not going to name them on this podcast, but mainly family, if I did not have the support system that I have, I don't think I would be in a mentally healthy space. And I can honestly say that. And it's because so many things happen in life, so many things hit us in life, that you need a support system. You need people that you can lean on, that you can call when you're having a bad day or if something bad just happened, because we all get to that breaking point where something's happening and something's wrong. And I feel like majority of times, the majority of things that I see in my line of work is those people who do not have a strong support system. Those are the ones that usually struggle with depression, low self-esteem, or have so many issues because they don't have anybody they can really call their own and lean on. Right. But it's so important to have, those people in your life. Sometimes it's family and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a girlfriend. Sometimes it's, a friend, a dude friend, or whatever it may be. You may need to just reach out when you need to, but reach out to those who are going to be healthy. That's one thing I will say. But it's important for you to ask yourself, what do you need in your support system? Once you identify who your support system is, what do you need and when do you need them? Like for me, when I'm going through something, I think my support system already knows, but I've gotten to the place where I'm more healthy now, where when I am struggling, I tell them. So before they have to figure it out and guess it, I'm quick to call my husband, and then I'm quick to call my mom, and then I'm quick to call my aunt and my cousin or whoever it may be. I'm quick to call them because they're my support, and I know I can lean on them. Right. And I'm quick to cry with them if I need to, or tell them what's going on, so that they are able to identify with me and tell me, well, do this. Or if they can't give me that answer, they can be my soundboard so I can vent. But once I identified them, I had to now get to that place where I tell them what's going on. And I think I've just reached that place in my life over the last 2 years where I've learned, don't just expect my support system to guess what's going on. It's important for me to go ahead and let them know what's going on. And so that's the next part I was going to say, is to make sure that you ask yourself, what do you need in your strong support system? When is it that you're going to need them? Because that's so important to identify.
I think recently I have an example for myself where recently I had an issue and it was weighing on me heavily, but it was making me really anxious. And I was reading scripture. I was doing what I know I can do. I was praying, reading scripture, talking to God, different things, but I knew that I needed to speak with someone. I don't have my mom to reach out to per se. Mm-hmm. So I have a few good friends, but I have one that at that moment God told me, to speak to that particular person. And I reached out, and I did not know that their testimony would line up with some of what I was going through. And it helped me get through what I was going through. And so I identify my support system by situations. I think we just went through a series at church where we talked about broken and scarred and different things. And one of the things that, Pastor talked about was that brokenness will often reveal what's needed in your life. How do you determine the different things you are doing in your life? Brokenness can reveal those things to help you heal. And so through the different journeys in my life, or different stages and points in my life, there have been different people there. And so my support system was identified from that. Now, these are people I'm talking about that are outside of the family. Because, of course, I have my husband. Of course, I have my sister-in-law, who is one of my greatest friends. Of course, I have aunties that I can talk to and other people. But I'm talking about outside of those people, I also have a number of people that I have identified in other ways. And those people have been strategically placed in my life in different seasons, but now they make a collective for me in different areas. So that's how I identify those people that are my support system. I have identified them from my landmark moments or from my standpoint moments in my life.
And I think that's a great way to explain it to everybody else, so they kind of identify, how do I choose the people who are my support? Because I think oftentimes a lot of people do not know how to choose support, and they lean on people that aren't really there for them. And so I think you just gave them a great example of a way to look at that, and look at those people in your life who have continuously been there, through the challenges, and through the good times. Because I think we often look at those who've been there through the good, but if we've never gone through anything negative with each other or bad, and you've never been there to support me and lift me up, I don't really know how you do under pressure or when I'm going through my anxious moment. So great job explaining that. And then the last thing with mental health that I want to kind of touch on is saying it's very important for you to set boundaries. It's very important for you to know your triggers, and then it's very important for you to not give up on yourself. You have to identify what are triggers to your mental health. Because there are triggers. There are things that oftentimes set us off a little bit more than others. That goes back to that thought process piece. There's oftentimes different thoughts that come into our mind, but every thought is brought in by something.
Correct.
A thought is anything that pops into your head, yes, but this is oftentimes brought in by something. So know your triggers, know those things that's going around that oftentimes put you in that negative mental health space. And then it's very important from there to set those boundaries with yourself. Set those boundaries with everybody else if you need to. Know when there's a certain person that may be triggering you more than others, or, whatever may be the issue, know what's going to hinder your mental health, and set those boundaries from there, so that way it does not continue to hinder it. And then it's very important to, like I said, not give up on yourself. Make sure you continue to have that practice that positive self-talk, and have that motivation for yourself to where you don't give up. It's very good to have external motivation, like you said, but it's even more important to have internal. And that's what we're talking about with that self-care. You have to get to that place where you have internal motivation to do things for yourself, to wake up every day, to say, I'm going to have positive thoughts, to say I love myself, to say I'm not giving up today. Whatever it may be, it's very important to gain that internal, because if you only have external, what if your external falls apart? I'm not wishing that on anybody, but life happens. And sometimes the very people that we lean on, sometimes they break
not
too.
There. Yeah.
So, it's very important to start to gain that internal motivation for yourself. So that's really what I want to focus on for self-care for mental health. And so now we're going to dive into what is self-care for that physical health piece.
Oh, and that's a great place to be. I can tell you this, self-care in the physical realm takes commitment.
Correct.
Because, so when we started, we talked about that mental space and identifying your triggers and different things like that. So in the process of identifying your triggers, you start looking at maybe other areas of your life. Physical is one. I know recently for me, I've changed my eating habits, which has been crazy for you guys, but great for me in certain areas. And I started by first listening to a few people on Facebook talking about how they had changed their lives to eating more of a vegan lifestyle. Now, I'm going to say this. I am by far not a vegan, but I have chosen to eliminate certain meats from my life. I've also chosen to eliminate certain processed foods and things like that from my life, because I found that I did not like how my body felt. I was diagnosed with diabetes and high blood pressure back in 2008, roughly, and I was never able to control that. I've done a number of different things, but I started telling myself, I want to get off of this medication. And one of the things that I did first was I prayed and I spent time and I said, God, I need to get off this medication. I have 2 grandchildren. I have children. I have a husband. And I know many people in my family and in my life that did not make it because of these 2 particular diseases. And that is genetically something, and it's also something that is within the African American community without eating habits. So I started saying, what can I do? And it was just funny. I started being on Facebook and seeing different situations where people were talking about what they were eating, what they were doing, and I started following it. And what I have done, like I said, is I've eliminated certain things from my eating patterns. I would say I'm flexible with my eating patterns. But for now, there's certain meats I don't eat, certain processed foods I don't eat, and I've seen a change. And I've also seen that change has affected my mental fortitude because of what I'm doing physically. I know sometimes we go out and I'll say, well, I don't know what I can eat here because I can't eat this and I can't eat that. But I do have a flexible lifestyle where, okay, if I do eat flesh, anything that is flesh, I'm eating something that's fish or some form of seafood, and I'm careful with things that are crustaceans or anything like a shrimp or anything like lobster and crab, which are my favorite seafoods, but I'm careful how often. And I've seen a dramatic a drop in my numbers for my sugars, especially for diabetes, and I've also seen a somewhat drop in my blood pressure. But I also know that some of my pressure is up just because of maybe other stressors in my life, and I'm learning to reduce those as well for my physical. We can improve our health physically, which reduce the help of developing diseases. It reduces the possibility of developing sicknesses that require medication or require a doctor's looking into it. I know a lot of people, when they think about physical, first thing they think about is exercise, which is supposed to be coupled with your routine of eating. But that's not the only thing. You have to learn to take things and put them together that works for you. Everybody's not a runner. I hurt my knee, so I can't run. So what do? I walk. And this is another thing that drives my family crazy. I might park a little bit further from the store. Oh, if you could only see the eye roll Crystal just gave me.
Because she does it all the time, and it's like it's not anything wrong with walking farther to the store, but she does it on weird times. Like, for example, if it's really hot outside, it's too hot to try to walk all the way to the store. And it's not like it's just me and her. It's me, her, and 2 babies. Like, no, ma'am. Park us close.
And everybody says that to me, but I know that I may not walk later in the day. Right. So what I do is I park a little bit further. I don't park in the spots up front. And my family does get frustrated, but I know what I need. I'm not a runner. My husband actually got me a treadmill, and I have not stepped on that thing yet because that's not me. I know that it's awesome to have it, but I don't know. Like I said, physical health takes commitment, and so I have to find a determination for the commitment for that part. I found the commitment for my eating habits. What I have not found yet is the commitment for the other activities, which I am coupling. But that, like I said, these are things that you grow to know. So you've already checked it out. You've already looked at it. You know what you need. And so physical health is very important. Eating better, taking care of yourself when it comes to even what you wear. I think physically. It's not an activity, but picking out the things that make you feel good in regards to even your physical appearance. Mm-hmm. Those things are even good too. For myself, I started making changes in me, and I've started denying doing everything for everybody else and taking this time for me. Because normally with the eating thing, it was everybody had to join me. So the kids had to be eating what I'm eating, and you remember these things. I've tried it several times. This time I sat down and said, no, this is for me. I want to take care of my health. And then on top of it, I have a lot of things that God is doing in my life that I have to keep moving towards, and they're going to take a physical commitment in my body. I'm not getting younger. I have in a few days, I'll be having a birthday, which gives me another year to life, and I thank God for it. But I have to recognize I'm not getting younger physically. So I have to take care of myself and do the things so that I can be equipped to run this race for Christ.
I agree with everything you said, and you kind of touched on a lot of different components. And so the first thing I remember you saying is how, what we do physically has an impact on our mental health, and that is so true. Physical health has an impact not just on our mental, but our emotional and on the spiritual, the other aspects that we talked about. Your physical health is so important.
Right.
Taking care of yourself is so important. Now, my mom is being vegan. I am not vegan. I'm not vegetarian. She's trying to attempt to be vegan, y'all. Lie to y'all. But I'm nowhere close to vegan, nor vegetarian, no pescatarian, none of them. None of the Tarians am I close to. Your girl's a meat lover. I'm not even gonna lie. However, it is very important to have a healthy diet. So I will say that. So I've been trying to do a little bit better with my diet, and some of that is just simply as increasing my water intake.
Yeah,
make sure that I'm hydrated, making sure that I have that fluid that I need.
Yes.
Making sure that I do incorporate at least one veggie, or throwing that salad. Throwing that salad because it's so important. But I'm not saying, and I don't think my mom is saying that everybody needs to switch up what you eat, cut out meat. No, if you are the type of person that wants to do that, correct, do it. And I will say, when I went that month without eating meat, my body felt so rejuvenated. Mind you, the very last week before I went back to eating meat, I got sick, and I think a lot of that was because my body was just now getting out all the toxins of the meat. Yeah. And I can say that month, I felt so revived. I felt energized. And so I will say, if you can take that fast or that diet for like a month or so and see how can you do, or even if you just do a week. But I will recommend a month, because I feel like within a month you really truly see a change. Right. I would recommend doing that and just kind of see where you are. But I am not saying that in order to have a healthy diet, you need to cut out meat. That's not necessarily true. Mm-hmm. Because nowadays, a lot of things have a lot of stuff in it that people don't tell you about, even the veggies. Correct. So it's just very important, though, to whatever a healthy diet looks like for you, look at that. If you are the type of person that has a lot of health risks, like diabetes, like high blood pressure, all those different things, then it is important for you to check what you're eating. Correct. You may not be able to eat some of the stuff that you want to eat. And so it doesn't mean cut it out. It means do proportion, wean yourself off. I think I've seen a lot of people fail these healthy aspects in the diet, and even with what I do with therapy, sometimes people want to work on changing their eating habits, and oftentimes they fail not because they really don't want to do it, but one, they're not committed fully because they're trying to do too much, and then two, they're trying to have all these different aspects when they should just focus on the components that's going to work for them. Correct. And so if you are having high blood pressure, then maybe you need to cut back on your salt. Yes. Maybe you need to cut back on this. So do those little things. Don't try to do everything all at once. Mm-hmm. Do proportions. Operate in small increments. Maybe you used to eat, cookies and ice cream every single day. Maybe you cut back to eating it 4 times a day. Or 4 times a week. Or 4 times a week. Or, now you then cut back to doing it 2 times. Do it in slow proportion until you get to that place. And then you talked about that exercise, which is so important. Whatever exercise looks like for you. You may not be that runner. You may not even be that walker. You may be somebody who's into yoga. You may be somebody who's into doing some simple things in your house because you don't really want to go to the gym. Whatever it is important to have the exercise. And then another thing that I will mention is getting sleep. Yeah, sleep is important. People fail to realize that a part of our physical health is sleep. Yeah. It was a whole phenomenon when Steve Harvey made the comment about sleep, and everybody I think in some way people blew what he was saying out of proportion. If you don't know what he said, just go look it up on YouTube or Google. But he made a comment about sleep. But it is very important to have restful sleep. Yeah. Yes. It is very important to make sure that you're doing things and make sure you get your job done. And, if you're not sleeping, you're not working. That's true. But sleep is also very important. It's so important to make sure that we're getting that regular sleep pattern so that way we can be rejuvenated. Sometimes your mind is all over the place because you just didn't get no sleep. Very true. And so making sure that you get the healthy diet, like my mom said, exercising and having that regular sleep pattern is so important to your physical health. It is. Very important. And so we're going to dive into that next component, that emotional health aspect. So how do we have self-care for our emotional health? So emotional health, what is that all about? Our emotional health is everything within our body regarding our emotions, regarding our feelings. Right. And I think my mom talked a lot about different components in the other segments that also tie into our emotional health, how we take care of ourselves, how we look. Correct. I'm going to start off with that. Just simply how we have our appearance. Right. Yes, that's the external with the physical, but then that's also internal because if we look good, we feel good. Yeah. And so one thing I know for me when I was going through a whole bunch of stuff, I simply got out of bed and I went shopping. And I said, you know what? I need to change my wardrobe, or I want to buy this and I want to do this and whatever it was. And that actually made me feel better, not because I was doing, shopping therapy, but because retail therapy, like we call it, but because I felt better because I looked better. I was taking care of myself. Even though I wasn't feeling good, I got my hair done. I put my makeup on. I put my cute dress on. I put my heels on. And that actually did help with my emotional health because I started feeling better about myself. So how you look, how you feel about yourself is so important to your emotional health. And every emotion is needed. Yeah. This is something I tell my clients all the time. Every emotion matters. If you're angry, I'm not telling you don't be angry. If you're sad, I'm not saying don't be sad. If you're happy, I'm not saying don't be happy or continue being happy, because every emotion matters. Everything happens for a reason. And so there's no way possible to cut out an emotion. If you're angry, you're angry. It's what you do that matters. So I may be angry. That's fine because that's how I really feel. Right. But if I'm angry and then I go punching walls and punching people, that's a problem. Exactly. So what I'm doing is the problem, not what I'm feeling. And so every emotion is needed. So don't hide how you feel. Don't hide how you feel about yourself. Don't hide how you feel about somebody else. Nurture your feelings instead. If you're feeling sad, figure out what is it that makes you feel sad. Right. Because that's what you need to identify. You don't need to stay sad. You don't need to stay angry. Figure out what is it that's making you that way. And then do those coping skills. Do those things that you like to do or that will help you get rid of that emotion for that moment. Right. Get rid of that emotion for that need that you need to move forward in. And so it's so important to not hide how you feel about yourself, because how you feel about yourself does impact your emotional health. If you put a Band-Aid on it, which I often tell people, and that Band-Aid fix means, I act like I don't feel that way, and you just put a Band-Aid on it and you keep going, eventually it's going to catch up to you. Right.
It gets weird.
So it's correct. It's so important to not hide it, but to nurture it. Right. Okay, I feel sad. Why? I feel sad because something just happened. Okay, what do I need to do to fix it? You go into that problem-solving mode, because now you not only identify what you feel, but you identify why you feel that way. Right. And so then we have to notice, who are we around? This kind of goes back to that thought process that we talked about with mind shift. Yeah. Who are you around? Who's around you? What situation? Because that impacts your emotional health. Correct. If you are around people that drain you, that's a problem, because that's going to impact your emotional health. And people don't think about that. But I've been around people that were just emotionally draining. And I don't really think they meant to be emotionally draining, but they were, because every time I was around them, they had a story to tell me or they had a problem to tell me. And then what people don't realize is what I do with my career is all about people telling me their problems. And so when I get around people in my social life, sometimes I stick to myself, not because I'm, fully antisocial, but because, I'm afraid that you're going to start telling me about yourself. And that's another thing I got to now latch on to in that moment. Even though it's unintentional on my part, that's just how I am because of my career. And so notice who you are around. I'm talking about in the positive aspect of just being around certain folks that, sometimes just want to share. But if you're around an actual person that is physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally draining, like every time you're around them, for whatever reason, you just start to feel sad and depressed. Think about that, because that is impacting your emotional health. So notice who you are around, and then notice who's coming around you consistently, because sometimes people do, latch on to people for different reasons. Some good, some not so good. So notice who you are around and why they're around. Right. Start to pick up on what people are doing and why they're around you. That's so important. And then know your worth. Know who you are. Know what you're about. Know that you are great no matter what people may tell you, because it's so important. I think this kind of ties back into that second point with noticing who you're around and who's around you. If you have people feeding negative stuff into your spirit, oftentimes people don't look at emotional abuse, but emotional abuse is an abuse. And so if they're always telling you you're ugly or putting you down or telling you something negative, or if you're noticing you're doing it to somebody else, you're damaging that person's emotional health. And that person's damaging your emotional health if they're doing it to you. Right. And so it's so important to know your worth, because people will often try to tell you who you are, what you should do, what you can't do. But it's so important to know who you are through Christ, to know what God tells you, to know your own worth, because people are going to do a lot and say a lot. But if you know who you are through Christ and who God says you are, and just who you know, what you have in your body, what you're worth, nobody can tell you anything else. And your emotional health, your self-esteem, because self-esteem is latched into emotional health, that's going to impact you.
Yeah.
in a positive way because you know your worth. So know your worth. Don't hide how you feel, and notice who you're around. All those are important to your emotional health.
Right, because self-care is necessary to remind yourself and others that you and your needs are important.
Very true.
Because if you don't put it at the beginning of where your critical list is, what will end up happening is people will treat you like you allow them to.
Correct.
And then self-care won't be a possibility because you have now made it so that everybody else's needs are more important than yours. So you have to be able to say yes and no. That is a word I had to learn.
Great word.
Great word. That no word. You know, and it's
Great
funny
word.
because the Bible speaks about that. Let your yes be yes and let your nay be nay. You know, a lot of times we say yes to everything, and that's not what God wants us to do. We cannot say yes to everything. Sometimes we have to say no. So that's a great segue into the spiritual side of self-care. What does the Lord say about self-care? You know, as believers, as Christians, whatever you want to call yourself, if you believe in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as a believer, we often think we're always supposed to be doing something, that the Lord is happy with us moving and doing all the time. And that may or may not be the truth. So we need to talk about what is it and what does the Word say to us about self-care. One of the things that the Lord talks about is, why does your self-care matter? I found a great article online, and it was from Dayspring, and it is titled, What Does God Say About Self-Care? And in regards to that, I read up on this article, and it helped me with it because it helped me see some pointers and some scriptures. We're going to post this so that you'll have it in your repertoire so you can actually pull it up and look at it sometimes, because it gives some great things, and that way you can fully read it, because I'm just going to go through it and give you some scriptures. But what does and why does it matter? And so the Matthew 22 verses 37 through 38, this is the why. Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. So here it is. Here's this gift that God has given us. You know, God's telling us that we have to be able to love ourselves. Love who we are first, right? And then we can also take that love, that self-care, and we can love someone else. So if I'm not taking care of myself and I'm bitter and I'm angry, how am I going to look at the person sitting next to me and love them too? So first, that's why it's important, because it's important to love myself so that I can also love others. But here's the other thing. What does it look like? Let's look at Luke 10:41 through 42. That's in the NIV version. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. And if you know the story, you know, she sat at his feet, and Mary sat at his feet, and she just spent time with him. She just spent time listening to him. She just spent time being in his presence. And sometimes we just need to be still.
Correct.
We're always moving, always doing. You know, the world that we live in tells us that in order to be successful, we have to be moving. In order to be doing anything, we have to always be moving. Sometimes it's just important to sit still. Sit down. Take that moment to just soak God in, to really just listen to him. You know, a lot of times we're praying. And this is something I learned years ago. We'd pray, and then close prayer service. We have not yet taken time to just be quiet. So we spend all that time praying, and at what point did we sit still to hear what he wanted to say back? It is a conversation. God is our friend. We are in a relationship with him. So if I'm doing all the talking, when does he get to talk?
That's good.
And when do I get to listen? So it's important to remember that part. What does it look like? And then how do we start? And let's look at Luke 5:16, NIV version. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. I often tell myself this, and growing up in the church as well as being a Christian as an adult, I would look at my pastors and leaders for the example. But as I got older and I really started seeking the scriptures for myself, I started realizing I should be looking at Jesus for the example, because he lived to show me how to live, right? He lived to show me how to live in this world and still be a child of God. And so I learned, one of the scriptures that I did take away was this one, was that sometimes we can withdraw. In the midst of the battle, after we've done the part we've had to do, sometimes we have to stop and rejuvenate. A battle-weary soldier will never get a job done.
That's very good.
Oh my God. We will never get a job done if I'm battle weary, because I've never rested. Now, that doesn't mean every soldier can rest, because sometimes they got to keep going to take on the next challenge. But you have to find a way to rest. For Jesus, he withdrew. Did that make him selfish? There were some things he couldn't do at that moment. He said, come on. He told his disciples, come on, let's get away. Let's withdraw to the other side. Maybe there was something simpler on the other side at that moment. You know what I mean? But it's in that moment. We got to learn when our body is saying no. We got to learn when our mind is saying stop. You know, right now I'm focusing on some different situations and tasks in my life, and things are not working out like I want them to. And I had to say, God, what is the answer? You know what the Lord said to me? Be still. Just be still. Just surrender it all to me. I know you think if you get this one thing worked out, then everything else is going to fall in place. But just be still. I know it's scary. I know that right now you can't see where this is going, because sitting still is not in your DNA. It's supposed to be. But because of the world that you live in and what you've trained yourself to do, you have now taken away that possibility of sitting still. So now I'm going to show you how to do this. And you give me everything else. Every problem, every situation, you give it to me. So that's important. Finally, let's look at Hebrews 4:9. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. God is letting us know there remains a time that we have to be still. Even on Sunday, for those who celebrate on Sunday or whatever day you celebrate on, so celebrate God on Saturday, Sunday, whatever, because everybody has different beliefs. But I celebrate on a Sunday. And even on my Sunday, I'm at church, I'm working. So where's my Sabbath rest? If the word has told me that I have to find a day to rest, I have to find time to rest. So for me, I've noticed that I've been getting up a lot earlier in the morning. And I take that first 2 hours of my day before I begin doing anything, spending time with God. And I take that as my rest. But God requires us to rest. Our brain is not a computer, so we can't just go without. And then finally, I want us to realize, look at Mark 4:19. The Bible talks about the deceitfulness of this world, the riches, the things we're chasing, the successes, whatever it be. Those things can very well choke out the word of God. It is so important for us to spend time with God, find time with him. Committed to that time. Pencil it in like we do everything else. I pencil in my bills. I pencil in the meetings. I pencil in all of the stuff I have to do, but I'm not penciling God in. And so it is important that we find time to pencil God in for our day, because it is through him that we have our life, our breath, and our living. And he can give us instruction on how to handle every situation and what we need for what's coming up, self-care and everything else. So it's important to pencil him in. So it's important to make a plan to incorporate rest into our daily life, making it necessary to spend time with God, and to also to reflect on what he requires.
No, that's very good. And it's funny because as you were speaking, everything that you kind of touched on was in the components of mental health, physical health, and emotional health. We talked about rest with mental. We talked about emotion, knowing what emotions you have and why you have those emotions in the moment. We talked about, taking care of yourselves, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't be of help to anybody else. And you mentioned that all within spiritual health. And so it's so important to touch on that spiritual health piece by spending time with Christ in our word, because that's where we find that groundedness. And so I think oftentimes people look at, I watch Pastor So-So on TV, and that's good enough. And there's nothing wrong with that. Or I just go to church on Sunday, that's good enough. Or I'm just going to go to Bible study, or whatever it may be for you. That's good, but also make sure that you're dedicating yourself to having that personal time for yourself. I think I've had the most spiritual health for myself when I've actually had that quiet time. And you're right, the world bombards us with so many things. It's so important to make sure that we have quiet personal time, a moment away from family, a moment away from everybody else, distractions, all the deceitfulness of the world that you talked about, and just make sure that we're in that quiet personal time, because that's the only time we can hear Christ. For me, that's just driving in my car to work. Every morning I drive in my car to work. That's my quiet personal time with Christ. I turn the radio off. That's just me and Christ. And then once me and Christ are done having that personal time, then I may listen to other things. But that's that quiet time for me and Christ to be by ourselves. And so it could be something for you just as simple as what I do, or it may be something different. But whatever it is, identify what that is for yourself and make sure you spend time with Christ. So we talked about, like I said, just to recap, that self-care for that mental health, for that physical health, for that emotional health, and that spiritual health. We could have gone on and on and on and on. And so I definitely think me and my mom are going to come back to revisiting this topic again and focusing maybe on one component or all the components again, or however you choose to do it, because this is such a loaded topic that I think we left out a lot, but we wanted to make sure that we share so many different aspects of having self-care so that way you can have just a little me time. So we both want to thank you for listening in today and want to encourage you to go and like our Facebook page and Instagram page, Sauce and Season, if you haven't already. On both platforms, you will find a post titled Today's Podcast, Just a Little Me Time on Self-Care. And we would love for you to go under there and post your thoughts and feelings regarding this week's podcast, and also encourage others to listen in. We hope that you are blessed in some way with today's podcast, and hope that you join us again for next week's podcast titled, They Said I'm Sorry, focusing on domestic violence, which will be released on Tuesday. Thank you and have a blessed day.